Welcome and thanks for listening to Finura Group's podcast, The Game of FinTech. Today, I'm your host, Danni and I'm a partner here at Finura Group and head up our consulting area. Our special guest today is our very own Peter Warren, who's the Joint Managing Director of Finura Group. So hello, Pete, and welcome to your own podcast.
Hey, Danni. Good to be back. Hopefully the tech works this time. We had
hopefully.
an epic fail last time, so let's see how we go.
Fingers crossed. All right, today we want to have a little bit of a team meeting, I guess, and do a check-in on our advice tech predictions and see how we're going so far, but also to delve a little deeper into the Investment Trends Advisor and Advice Tech report for 2022. I think we can maybe start to draw some parallels between that report and our advice tech predictions, given what's playing out in the market right now. And as always, we like to give our listeners some practical tips along the way too.
Sounds good. Plenty of noise out there at the moment. And I suppose if you make enough predictions, one of them has to come true eventually. So let's see how we went.
Fingers crossed. All right. Wealth tech predictions. So I just wanted to firstly go back to one of our 2022 predictions, which was around digital advice heating up. Back then, we predicted that many institutions would look to build solutions around digital advice. We said that this year, we said we got that one partially right when we did our 2023 report. But since then, as we all know, we've had a delivery of the QAR recommendations and we've heard Minister Stephen Jones discussing the report in public forums. And one of those big ticket items is digital advice. So I guess I just wanted to ask, what are your thoughts now? Are we changing our thinking on this? What is digital advice and what problem really is it trying to solve?
Yeah, I still think we're figuring that out as an industry. I think the QAR highlighted that we all have different views on what digital advice actually is. You can read the various submissions that were made by super funds, technology providers and other stakeholders, and there was definitely different views. As recently as yesterday, I actually heard of a digital advice association being formed. So I had a chat to them this morning, actually, so there'll be some media on that in the next day or two, with a stated goal of actually trying to educate the industry on the practicalities of digital advice, which I think is not a bad idea because everyone's got so many different interpretations. The thing that I'm secretly pleased about is the whole idea of building in-house bespoke digital advice solutions is sort of off the table for most institutions, super funds and others. I think that's because a lot of it's due to the macro environment where, the economy's looking unpredictable. And no one has a huge desire to take on big capital-intensive projects without really clear goals or benefits as to why you would do it. So I'm really pleased because I think that really opens the door, hopefully, to the established technology players, but also some of the startups that have been, at this for a long time. I mean, some of the digital advice providers have been going nearly 10 years, and none of them have really landed a big client that we've noted yet. So the tide is turning, I think, but gee, this industry moves slow. So I do feel for the digital advice providers. I think they and their investors need some certainty at the moment that super funds, product manufacturers are looking to invest in this space or co-invest. I am aware of one digital advice provider that's taken on a fairly large investment for a product manufacturer. I can't share who that is. It's still confidential, I think, but it will come to light at some point in the next couple of months. And I think given that no one wants to be first or last in this industry, once that gets announced, we'll probably see a few more. So I'm bullish on the space. I just worry that some of these startups may run out of money before they get that all-important customer. So anything I think that this industry can do to bring that whole digital advice strategy to life and the importance of it is a good thing. And I feel that we'll talk about QAR maybe later, but I do feel the one area that Levy was quite bullish on and even publicly disclosed she was using was digital advice for herself, for her and her family. So, I mean, if it's going to work for someone like Michelle Levy, then maybe we do need to lean into this a bit more.
Yeah. And do you think even as an industry, we really grasp the concept of what digital advice is? I feel like we might have different views as to what is actually digital advice and how that can help our clients potentially as a smaller advice business, not part of an institutional super fund or something like that? Do you think we sort of need a little bit more understanding of what that actually means and how it can help our advice businesses?
Yeah, I mean, advisors more than I do, Danny. They're so hesitant often to embrace new technology. And I think anything that particularly gets in the middle of their relationship with a client is sort of treated even with softer gloves by an advisor. So, the guys at Open Invest have had some wins with this, getting self-licensed businesses to build sort of straight-to-consumer offers, usually through a managed account solution or direct from a fund manager. Very investment-centric, though, not really a holistic advice approach, which they would admit. But that, to me, says there's appetite. I would suggest that there's two camps. The sort of the smaller IFAs or smaller practices, this just isn't on the radar. They've got far more pressing issues around their business model and their cost to serve and all those things that are causing challenges for all small businesses, frankly. But certainly the bigger practices, and when I mean bigger, I mean $10 million turnover type businesses who have got bigger books of previously advised clients or just can't meet even the referrals that are coming through from clients or children of clients are probably going to be the first ones in this space. They'll move slower. I wouldn't be building a whole business model on that. I'm getting advisors to launch in-house digital advice solutions, but maybe it's a good adjunct to the solutions they're using for comprehensive advice to have a digital capability. And some of the tech providers are doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, and sort of, I guess, something that may reach, to your point about Michelle Levy and her family as well, maybe sort of tackling that intergenerational transfer of wealth piece as well. We've got younger clients who are more tech savvy and, more, want the quick advice and the quick wins.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So on to our 2023 predictions. Prediction 1. So our first prediction for 2023 was and is still startups stop a tough year ahead. So just to recap, we called out the fact that venture funding seems to be drying up and that competition for funding is only going to get more intense. We've predicted that startups in their early phases may not have raised enough capital and could start to struggle this year. We also called out the fact that some tech companies have made over-enthusiastic promises to customers and this could essentially start to backfire. And I guess I sort of feel like we're really starting to see this play out in front of our eyes. And the other thing I guess to note too is that, we still have this issue with a shrinking advisor market here in Australia. We've pretty much halved the amount of advisors since 2019, sitting at around 15,500 now. So that dynamic is still presenting a challenge for tech providers to make significant inroads in Australia. What do you think about this one?
I think we're just at the start of a bit of a bloodbath, frankly. I think you're certainly seeing that in other markets, certainly in the US. There's sort of a few layers to it, I guess. I mean, there are a bunch of startups in our industry who are entirely bootstrapped. So by bootstrapped, I mean entirely funded by the founders, pretty lean, so they're not spending huge amounts of money, and they've just sort of slowly chipped away at it, and they'll probably be fine. They'll just sort of scale back development or just go slower or whatever they need to do to survive, and that's something you can do. But particularly if you've raised outside venture capital, there's usually two things going on. There's a race to spend the money because venture firms want to see you grow at a fast rate, and they you're almost on a ticking clock to get product market fit and get validity to your business model and get to your next capital raise. Of course, the assumption is that you can then raise the capital at the next juncture. So certainly businesses that are proving product market fit and are growing are getting further investment, no problem. In fact, there's more competition for good businesses now than ever. But if you haven't hit the mark, if you haven't met your promises for customer acquisition or for the solution itself, you could be in trouble, particularly where you've maybe gone for an accelerated growth trajectory. You've hired lots of developers. You've spent a lot of sales and marketing, just all that common sense sort of stuff playing out. So there's definitely a few who have, gone to the wall. probably the most notable one was Creative Mass, went into voluntary administration a couple of weeks ago. So that's public knowledge now. There was an ASIC notice about that. That's probably not a bad example of a business that was on an accelerated growth trajectory, raised lots of external capital from what we understand. But, the burn rate per month, the cash going out every month was probably pretty high.
Yeah.
And to keep businesses like that going, you're not talking about a few $100,000 extra tipping in from the friends and family kind of thing. You're talking about in the many millions to keep those businesses going for the foreseeable future. So that's a really unfortunate story because, they've hired lots of good people. We want more advice tech competition. There was some validity to that strategy, building something really cool on Salesforce that maybe still holds some merit. But as always, like any business, it's just around execution. And if some of those assumptions, in any startup, if you make some assumptions around your growth and your business model, and if those assumptions don't hold up in the future, the tide goes out. So not sure what's going to happen with that business. There's probably some good core tech there that will end up in someone's hands. They do have a couple of key institutional customers who probably have a vested interest in seeing it continue because they've invested themselves. But, an interesting story there, and probably will be a bit of a reference case, I think, for future for businesses that are trying to tackle this wealth industry in Australia. It's harder than people think, as we've always said. And you need very, very patient capital to get it going, and venture funding is not patient.
Yeah. And, of course, that leaves a trail of destruction as well, I guess, for the advisors that have been onboarded into Creative Mass and now have to find another solution. That's big upheaval for a smaller business to have to go through. So, as always, giving some practical tips out here, we can't stress how important it is to do your due diligence on your technology providers and, really sort of look at that, the long-term prospects of that business and really sort of delve as deep as you possibly can in there to make sure that you've got a technology partner that is going to be with you and support your business for the long term. Yeah,
I think, it's a good lesson. I mean, I think particularly where you're not talking about a piece of tech that's really core to your business. So if it sort of touches the CRM particularly, then you have to be extra careful. I think anything with CRM, client portal, I'd probably put in this category too, that where security is really important and all those things. I think extra due diligence. Maybe some of the other things like client engagement tools and the nice to haves are not as critical, where you can sort of interchange them if something went wrong down the track. But I think you've got to apply a bit of a risk adjusted measure on if this thing fails, what would it do to my business? Is probably the fundamental question. It's probably a little different. The Creative Mass issue is probably a little different to C-Cube, which happened a few years ago. That business was a custom CRM. So I'm aware that those customers were given literally before Open Markets bought it, were given 3 weeks to get their data out. Otherwise, the servers were being turned off. The AWS servers were being turned off. They would have lost their data. The Creative Mass issue will be different because all those customers are on Salesforce. So they're going to be okay provided they keep paying their Salesforce bills. But as you know, Danny, there's a big decision there to be made about, well, what next, with Salesforce particularly. So, these stories are really hard. Don't like, for a lot of reasons, not good for anybody, because we want advisors to try new things and, take some bets with technology, and someone's got to be the first customer, right? That's the other thing you're forgetting. But there's probably some light touch due diligence that you can do both initially and along the way, and you put a lot of content out, Danny, about that on socials, that I think would probably help you avoid some of the landmines that may be obvious to people like us, but maybe not so obvious to people that don't do this every day. Yeah, and that's a good point too. Being a first mover, can be a really positive thing as well. You get to grow with the technology. You get to have some really solid inputs into the direction of that technology. Obviously, you're going to get your hand held. You're going to have all the support available to you, being a first mover. And, the tech provider obviously wants you to have a really good experience. So, that could actually be a really positive thing as well. I just caution you, either be a customer or a shareholder. Maybe don't be both. Yes. Because I think that's when people lose perspective in their relationship with their tech provider. And we've certainly come across quite a few incidents of, tech being recommended and those things. And it turns out the users are all shareholders and, it's not transparent. And anyway, I think that's fairly self-evident that that's not a good place to be.
Yeah, good point. All right, moving on to prediction 2. So this is client portal use goes mainstream. So I guess it's fair to say most of our clients here at Finura currently don't have a client portal solution in place, and that it goes really hand in hand with the investment trends data, where we see around about 40% of advice businesses currently using a client portal. And our clients are coming to us for a variety of reasons, but it seems to me recently, I don't know if you agree here, our clients are coming to us with client portal at top of mind. And that is because of the cybersecurity issue being at the forefront, I guess, of everybody's minds. We've had Medibank, Optus, now Latitude data breaches as well. We know that financial planners are at extreme risks for cyber attacks given the personal data that they hold. And, to be honest, we're not very good as an industry at handling that personal data. We still are emailing sensitive documents to our clients, fact finds, advice documents with all the personal information. We know that can be intercepted really easily. So client portals obviously help to solve that problem, or help to at least support good cybersecurity measures. And just to sort of, I guess, draw the information in again about cybercrime. Every 7 minutes, we've got a cybercrime incident in Australia that's being reported, and the average cost of those cyber reports are between $39,000 and $88,000. So this is really serious for a financial planning business. That's obviously a huge hit if you get hit with one of those cyber incidences. We do hold the most sensitive personal information about our clients, and client portals do serve that cybersecurity perspective, but they also help, onboarding with a client as well. So they can really hit an efficiency and a pain point in a business and help a business do that. So we're, as usual, really pleased to see end-to-end advice tech investing heavily in client portal offerings. And that seems to be sort of increasing. A lot of focus is being put into these areas. We have the standalone solutions as well that we're seeing in market as well. What do you think about this prediction? I feel like we're really getting this one right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, we're not the only ones talking about it. There's been some other industry sort of experts promoting this as well as a key pillar for a tech stack. So, yeah, it's great. I'm really glad to see it. I'd like there to be, hopefully more choice for advisors. There's only really a couple of really solid ones in sort of Finura's opinion who do all those things. Still strongly encourage people to resist the urge to build their own portals and exhaust your options with the existing tech you've got before you go too far afield or get too carried away and think about the job you want that portal to do, which if the North Star is data protection, then work backwards from that. But I think the challenge is, even in that investment trends data where I think 45% of clients have access to a portal, I think a lot are still just using the platform as their main portal, which is sort of a different job in reality. And particularly if you're a financial planning business like many that do accounting, estate planning, other services for clients, then you're going to need that portal to do more things than a platform does, frankly. So really hoping to see more investment from the major technology providers in their portal capability, hopefully more mobile friendly, because so many portals that really only work properly on a desktop, which, everyone does stuff with their phones now, frankly. So that will be a big battleground. And I think there's a couple of key providers that are going to win in that space. So yeah, Danny, I think it's great. But as what do you think? Because it's putting a portal in is really different. It's not like changing fact find or changing modeling software. It then changes the relationship you have with a client, how you do business with a client. So there's a big change management piece, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's right. It's really the only piece of advice tech that hits the end client outside of the platform, client portals, obviously, or portal offerings. So, I agree. I think it's something that you would need to pilot with a bunch of your clients. I think advisors, we find this as well, are sometimes afraid of rolling client portals out to their clients. They think they're not going to be able to handle or understand how to use that client portal. But I think we always need to remember COVID. COVID happened and we all had to go online to do everything, including no matter what age you were, you had to go online to do your stuff. So we're it's here now. So I don't think that we should be afraid of that. And I think it can really uplift that service that you provide to your clients, that they're getting good service from other services that they're getting outside of financial advice, most likely using technology and that sort of thing. So I think we sort of really don't need to be afraid of that. It's a good thing to embrace. But yes, I think it's change management, like you say, and it's a baby steps approach. And, you need to remember that your clients might be calling you for tech support now because the client can't log in and that sort of thing. So you're going to have to train your team up as to how to become a support person.
Yeah, but hopefully the efficiency you get will, create space for that extra work. And you're totally right. I mean, we all forget, like a year ago, we couldn't go get a coffee without using our COVID safe app and showing our vaccination. I mean, didn't matter how old you were, who you were, you had to show that. So, I think you're so right. And there's just this awesome window we've got now with clients with the cyber awareness piece really cutting through mainstream to sell this as a real benefit. And I wouldn't be surprised in a few years if clients kind of expect this anyway. And hearing noise too from some licensees, particularly who are looking at really tightening down on this, particularly sharing of stuff over email and what tends to happen at the moment, and locking this down and saying you must use portals in future to secure clients. And, that's something that, the UK, the guys over in Intelliflo have been talking about a long time. That's just the way of doing business over there. Frankly. They've been on that journey for a long time, and probably why they've invested in their tech. So, so fingers crossed, tech providers keep investing in capability. I think it's going to be a key differentiator for the future. Hopefully we get more advisors sharing their stories of how they've successfully got clients to adopt it and change their business model around it. Because you're totally right. That's the key thing to change. Yeah. Good one.
Great. I think we're doing well so far with our predictions. Fingers crossed. Okay, prediction 4, platform tech arms race grows. So the data suggests that we might be looking at a 3-horse race between Hub24, Macquarie and Netwealth. We do think that Praemium might be likely to be involved in an M&A transaction at some stage this year in 2023. We've seen the tides turn against the ex-bank players with evaporating distribution and ageing technology, and probably ongoing service level issues for advisors is a big one as well with the platforms. But we do know that we are going to start to see some more of those contemporary offers this year from CFS and Macquarie with the really big technology overhaul. Investment Trends report does demonstrate that platforms are seriously considering their offer from a tech perspective and are looking to move into offering solutions that can really sort of dig a little bit deeper and help with that back office and the advice journey as well when it comes to implementation and client reviews and that sort of thing. But also when engaging with clients as well. So like you pointed out before, client portals are sort of really are a part of platforms, but platforms are sort of making that look a lot cooler, I guess, as well, and investing in that visual for clients and that experience for clients as well. What do you think? Where are platforms headed when it comes to supporting advice businesses outside of the traditional way that they do with investment reporting and portfolio management and transactional functionality?
This is some may be cynical about this, but I think the facts remain that the balance sheet, the capital in our industry and wealth is concentrated in the platform providers. So Hub, Netwealth, Macquarie, BT, CFS, and even if you look at the businesses like AMP and IWF, their shareholders apportion most of the value to their product businesses, not their advice businesses. That's always been that way, just how it is today. So if you look at Wexit, the exit of banks and licensees owned by banks from the industry, we've sort of been left with, in reality, a whole bunch of effectively smaller licensees. Whilst have lots of advisors, they've got less capital than probably they don't have a big parent anymore in most cases. So controversial. I kind of feel like platforms are going to be the quasi licensee service providers of the future, because who else is there in reality to do this at scale? They have a distribution challenge because halving advisor numbers affects their business. So they want to build more loyalty and trust, and as platforms are less and less differentiated, let's be honest, it's a price game in a lot of cases. They're throwing everything at winning more share of business, and that usually involves tech and services. But the tide, I mean, you look at the recent numbers, the 60 to 70% of net flows are going to those top 3 providers still, NetHub, NetWealth, Macquarie. Interesting enough, NetWealth put out some market updates yesterday or the day before and said, flows are a bit flatter. So the share price got whacked 10%. So maybe they're seeing a bit of a slowdown in transitions and all those things that are happening. But, the tide's very much turning to those top three. That tends to be what happens in most industries that are hyper competitive. You usually end up with one or two or three that kind of dominate in most spaces. But there's, we know a lot of capital being spent by the others to sort of play catch up, and a lot of fun that they're holding as well. So it's a great time to be an advisor choosing a platform because they're so competitive and the price is great. So it's great outcomes for consumers, and we still live in a best interest world. So the reality is that advisors still have to make reasonable efforts to compare platforms and choose the right one, every client.
Yeah.
So this war is going to go on, I think, for a while. I think, though, M&A is inevitable because, like we've seen in the US, and I think our report spoke about it, that 85% of all US flows in the RIA or IFA equivalent space go to the top three custodians in the US, and even then we saw consolidation amongst those top providers.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of is the basis behind, to an extent, the Praemium prediction that an M&A outcome's likely there, only because Praemium got some really unique tech for non-custodial assets that I think is quite desirable. So we watch with interest for that. So, yeah, it's a really interesting space, huge amounts of focus and capital at this point. But the inescapable truth is that their distribution model, which is the advisors, have greatly shrunk. And certainly those platforms like Hub and NetWealth, and to an extent Macquarie, who for a long time have had a strategy based on IFA, effectively distribution, or non-aligned distribution, they're kind of winning. And I think those other platforms may, do well to look at, well, what's driving that and how do we change that? So, really interesting space. And we shall see how it plays out.
I think if we're sort of looking about at the practical tips for advice businesses on, if they're looking to other platforms, I guess, again, doing due diligence on those platforms and starting to ask those questions that you'd probably ask of your advice tech provider or your core CRM provider, as to what does your technology roadmap look like from a tech perspective, and how's that going to support the CRM that I'm using potentially, and what sort of integrations do you have and how do they look? Those sort of questions, because that's really going to help the back office at the end of the day.
Yeah. And the other thing that's going to be really interesting to see play out, we don't know a lot of detail, obviously, but, Iris has sort of gone quite public with trying to build more infrastructure for the industry that allows software and platforms to talk to each other more effectively, particularly with client onboarding and trading execution. And how platforms think about that strategically is really important to, we know platforms have invested an awful lot of amount of money on advisor experience, UX and systems and various things, and how much of that then lives in the planning software versus the platform software. And you got some providers who are trying to go end to end, like Dash are trying to build an end to end sort of story where it's all in one shop, arguably, which, people have different views on, but it's, so the reality is, though, because the platform valuations are so high still, NetWealth and Hub are still multi-billion-dollar businesses. There's still a lot of capital, hungry capital to invest in these types of businesses, even for the chance of getting it right. But seeing what happened in the US and knowing what advisor numbers are doing, you just can't help but think there's going to be some sort of likely consolidation in platforms at some time, or privatization, or various things will play out, I think, with that. But no, I'd say those predictions are fairly on track. And I think, the Investor Trends data still says that most advice firms use more than 3 platforms still. So no one's really getting a monogamous relationship with a platform provider yet. And that's a piece of the puzzle, I think, at some point.
Yeah, good point. All right, prediction number 5, fewer foreign raiders is our prediction here. So we've seen a flood of foreign raiders in Australia over the past few years. I think from the beginning of 2019, we started to really sort of see that take place. We have observed that gaining traction here as a tech provider from a different jurisdiction has been difficult, and that's probably due to an underestimation of the localization requirements to get a solution up and running here in Australia. As we know, overhauling technology and advice business is a massive undertaking, so the offer needs to be really compelling for advisors to make that decision to jump to another solution. Again, you know, we keep talking about it, the number of advisors has shrunk significantly. But that being said, advisors are looking for the superior support when it comes to onboarding into a new solution, and that also that ongoing support into how to get the most out of those solutions. And some of those international players do that very, very well. So what are we thinking here? Are we still sticking to this prediction for your foreign raiders?
Yeah, I think so. In certain aspects, we're hearing lots of noise around some of these multinational tech players looking to divest their overseas operations. So, you know, looking to either cut off Australia or cut off UK or US or Europe or whatever they're doing. So a lot of businesses are on a simplification journey at the moment. And I would suggest that if you sort of look at a geography like Australia or somewhere else, which is where you've got a subscale presence, your growth prospects don't look great, and you read those data points around, and particularly if your revenue's tied to advisor numbers, lesser extent FUM or FUA, because I think the superannuation system makes Australia really desirable if you're in the FUM game. But if you're an advisor revenue type game, I think, I would suggest you'll see more of that. So the players that we're sort of seeing still active in this market are probably ones that have been here a long time and are still sort of trying. But interesting enough, they're not investing, so they're not putting people on the ground locally. They're getting people to service Australia from other geographies, and you know, just sort of, I don't know, toe on the water, Danny, I suppose you'd call it for many at this point. Yeah. But I'd be really surprised if a new global player emerged from nowhere and said we're going to challenge the Australian advice tech market. I'd be amazed.
Yeah. It's kind of, you know, we talk about this a lot. We really want global players here. We really want to have a market that's rich with options. You know, it's good to have the options, and it's good for advisors that, you know, all advice businesses do certain things differently in the way that they run their businesses, and those solutions can potentially serve them really well. You know, we don't want to be tied to any one particular solution if we can help it. But, you know, so it's sort of disappointing, but those dynamics in terms of the actual advisors that are the advisor numbers here is really big.
I think what's more likely to happen is what we've seen already, which is private equity and foreign capital investing in advice businesses themselves. So, you know, on the surface of it, you look at Australia and go, well, shrinking advisor numbers, massively growing savings pool, retirement, big advice supply gap, and relatively capital constrained AFSL model. It's right for these well-backed, credentialed advice specialist providers from the US particularly, I would say, who have got many, many billions in assets under management, hundreds of employees. I think they're going to come out here in a meaningful way. It wasn't lost on me that, you know, Lumient raised some money from Savant, which is a really well-known and highly respected wealth business in the US. I wouldn't be surprised to see them make some investments in Australian advice businesses because it's a really good market from that perspective. So maybe it's less about foreign tech coming and more about foreign advice models coming to Australia. And to be honest, I think we are capital constrained in advice in Australia. We're pretty cottage still. So I think the guys at Focus Financial have been doing, AZNGA have been doing it, and net capital into the advice businesses is a really good thing. So I'm probably seeing that more than on the tech side currently.
Interesting. Lots to look out for in that area. All right, so we're going a little bit off topic here, but I just wanted to talk to you about the SOA chatter that's going on at the moment. So as we know, QAR is out there now. The government seems to be paying attention, and as an industry, or I guess at least from a media perspective, it seems that we have this hyper focus on the SOA recommendation that was in the QAR. report. So just a reminder, I'll just try and quickly summarise this of what that recommendation actually is. So the requirement to provide a statement of advice or a record of advice should be replaced with the requirement for providers of personal advice to retail clients to maintain complete records of the advice provided and to provide written advice on request by the client. Clients should be asked whether they would like written advice before or at the time the advice is provided, and a request for written advice is required to be made before or at the time the advice is provided. There's a little bit more to it, but I won't go into that. So the way I understand that recommendation is that you're still going to have some sort of advice document or whatever you want to call it available for your client, because they could potentially ask you for it and you will need to provide that to them. So I think we're all aware that QAR needs to go through further consultation processes and through government to get any traction, and we know this is going to take some time. We didn't really get any clear understanding of timeframes from Minister Stephen Jones, other than that it has to go through the process. And he did point at the recommendations that were regulatory rather than legislative could potentially be attacked first. So if you really want to try and take the heat off advice businesses, I really feel like we should be attacking fee consent first and foremost. Every single one of our clients, I'm going to say 100% of our clients, when we run through their technology and how they're using it currently, have a really big issue with fee consent and the way that it's managed. And it takes a long time to run through that process in an advice business. So we also know that most of our clients wouldn't ditch the SOA should things change. They see it as important to cover what they've recommended to their clients, but also it does form part of their value proposition. And sure, we can cut it back. That would definitely help. But it doesn't really appear to me to be the key problem we're trying to solve here. Do you agree, or are we on the same page here?
I agree. Look, a couple of things. I first of all, somehow at some juncture in the last 18 months, in some meeting room somewhere in Australia, it was decided that the SOA was the defenceless sort of burning platform that everyone would point to as the key issue in the financial, slowing up the financial advice industry in Australia. It's just not accurate. Mm-hmm. So I think some of the data that was produced by KPMG did a report on SOA costs and those things were just, factually missing a lot of breadth, I think, because they only surveyed a certain number of practices that didn't actually disclose who they were. And you and I both know there's a huge difference between how certain businesses produce advice and others, and how much they've invested in their advice delivery technology. And, so there'll be a wide spectrum of what SOAs actually cost to produce. So that's just sort of the first thing I just want to put on the table, that it was just easy to point to the SOA as this thing because no one really, the SOAs couldn't fight to defend themselves, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But there is a point that, which was not lost, that SOAs are way too long, full of text. I remember my wife got her first SOA from our advisor. She works in the legal industry, and she was staggered by how poorly it was written, the layout, the lack of white space. And she just said, how am I meant to interpret this? And she was bang on. Yeah. And that was, SOA produced out of an X-Plan wizard, and there was nothing wrong with it. Structurally, it was all good, but it's just that a lot of that stuff was licensee gumph and unnecessary text that could be put in there. So I think everyone agrees on that. But if you actually look at the ASIC guidelines for SOAs, it's pretty clear, concise and effective. And I just wonder, are we going to end up, when ASIC sort of goes away and is asked to do their work on reviewing the SOA requirements, they're going to come back with something pretty similar to what we have today? Yeah. I also find it pretty fascinating that only as recently as on Monday, when Professional Planner ran a webinar with Michelle Levy and on just where are we at with QAR and predictions, that she already sort of conceded that maybe ditching the document isn't the right approach. I get her intent, which is to say, hey, you shouldn't be prescribing at a legislation level what goes into a document for the client advisor. It's pretty, that does make sense to me. It should be something that's more in regulation or guidelines for an AFSL. Yeah. But you're right. The practicalities are still that advisors still want to give their clients something in writing. I thought Matt Lawler from AMP made a really good observation when he said clients have selective memories, particularly when investment returns don't go the way we expect. And I think you got to put stuff in writing. The other thing from my experience, my mum has a financial advisor. She always sends me the ROAs or advice documents that her advisor produces for her to read them. And I do, and scan them. And that kind of applies. Yeah, there's so many layers to this, but you're 100% on the money. If we can actually completely overhaul the fee consent process, the FDS process, that is a massive win for this industry.
Yeah.
And I just hope the SOA debate doesn't get caught up in that. And I hope we get on with the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. Shortening SOAs is not going to lower the cost of advice. I don't know a single advice business in Australia that's thinking about lowering their fees at all.
Yeah.
And you'd also say that advice businesses, actually, the ones we talk to, they don't write that many SOAs. Like they'll probably do maybe 1 or 2 a week, maybe. Yeah. Depends on the business and size and all those sort of things. But, it's often when they change licensee or those things happen or they buy books of business. And they're the triggers for SOA. So I just hope a bit of common sense prevails and we don't invest far too much time on fixing maybe a problem that's not as big as we think it is. But actually we get right behind this fee consent FDS issue. That for me is the big one. It's just been a curiosity to me, the whole demonisation of an SOA.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, being an industry veteran and being around for a long time, when we had CARs and strategy papers, they were the 2 and 3 page documents, and, things fell off those SOAs, and we did get problems with advice delivery to clients, and hence the SOA was formed so that we could, cover off those recommendations and give good advice and all that sort of stuff back in those days. And now we're sort of looking to take that away. Yeah, I'm with you. It doesn't sort of make a lot of sense. I think if you've got the right technology, again, we're always going to talk about technology helping you do this stuff. Then it's not a huge deal. We certainly don't find it's one of the huge pain points when we're talking to our clients on technology roadmaps and where they're experiencing those issues. SOA rarely comes up. Yeah, it does come up as a we need to revamp it or revisit or recode a few things for sure.
And I think we've got to be careful what we wish for here, right? I mean, my first job in the industry was a paraplanner, and I remember getting chook scrap file notes from advisors and, and instructions on what the advice was to be. And, everyone's got different skills, but a lot of advisors are awesome in front of clients and really good at getting that personal information around goals and where people are heading and explaining difficult concepts. But when it comes to actually writing documents, that's maybe not a skill set that advisors typically have. So, and I think paraplanners in particular, we put through a lot of stress, frankly, needlessly, in the last 6 months, saying their business models are relevant and all this stuff. Nothing could be further from the truth. That skill set of writing clear, concise advice, doing the modelling behind the scenes. We still have a ridiculously complex and ever-changing superannuation and social security system in Australia, which requires thoughtful modelling and strategy to go ahead. That even with all the emerging technologies, I don't think you can get a computer to do. I think it's art and science. And I think their skills are so needed for the future. So, flying a flag for the paraplanners here and saying that their skills are incredibly valuable. And I think even be careful what you wish for here, because if you strip away the need for advice docs, licensees, potentially could take their hands off the wheel and say, well, it's up to you now to solve that. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of people saying, well, what do we put in these things? It can create more work, actually, just starting from scratch. I think anyone that's tried to build a PowerPoint slide from scratch to articulate advice to clients will tell you that it's better to at least have something structurally to work with before you start. Even how Finura gives advice to clients, we have a process and a structure we know works for communicating a story. So, I think the noise will die in this one. I do hope to see some of the stuff go to incorporation by reference, so we don't have to put 40 pages of standard product text and just unnecessary repetition. But the actual content of the SOA will still be as challenging and thorough, have such thorough requirements to put in there that I still think it's going to take a few hours to do. Irrespective. Anyway. Yeah,
absolutely. And back to your point about paraplanners too, utilising those tools that are available in advice tech. They're complex, right? Cash flow modelling tools. You need to understand how to use them. You need to understand how to work around some of the modelling features in there, and power planners have a really good grasp on how to do that. Our advisors going to want to sit there and actually sort of learn how to use those tools as well as engaging with their clients and servicing their clients and that sort of thing.
Never fear, power planners. Your jobs are very secure, in my opinion.
I agree. All right. Any final thoughts?
Oh, look, I just want to, we'll probably wrap up soon, but I guess there's just a lot of noise still in the industry. I was talking to a few tech providers today about it, and I think that, you think about QAR, you think about all the emerging themes in technology and uncertainty, regulatory environments, and even I look at our Slack channel at Finura, and there's always something different going on every day that we're chatting about. And I don't know, I would just, something more, probably counselling myself here more than our clients, but I'd say focusing on controllables is going to be a really important theme for us as an industry for the next 12 to 18 months. And we have so much opportunity, so many problems that need to be fixed, irrespective of what happens to QAR. I think the portal conversation is a great one for most businesses to pick up today and do something with, irrespective. In fact, it could help underpin a QAR, more friendly QAR environment. And the only other thing I'd point out too, which I didn't expect to talk about today, but I'm going to anyway, is, I'm finding across advice businesses that we work with, people are getting a bit burnt out. So I just want to make a quick shout out to business owners who are, running small and medium businesses who are just keep an eye on your employees at the moment. I think, I don't know whether it's post-COVID, Danny, or too many Teams meetings or what's going on, or our digital worlds, but I even find myself, my brain's not working as efficiently as it normally does. So I don't know, maybe a bit less tech every day might not be a bad thing for businesses, and simplifying what you do where possible. So I think my key things are, less noise, less industry chatter, and more focusing on the problems that you can actually control and solve. Kind of where I'm at the moment.
I love it. I love it too with the Teams meetings. I think because we generally, most of us work from home, or at least, hybrid work from home and in the office. And with Teams meetings, you're always available, right? If you've got a spot in your calendar, you can chuck a team meeting in there, or somebody can book a time in with you. So you're not, when you're in an office, you might go out and grab a coffee or go and chat to your friends in the kitchen or whatever it might be. We're not sort of taking those breaks that we are used to taking. So I completely understand the burnout. If it's meeting after meeting after meeting, it is a very real issue, I feel.
And maybe that's a good North Star for some technology decisions in the future, is how do we make our employees' lives better? Yeah. And not just the tech we use, but how we use it. Because, some firms we talk to, they'll use Slack or Teams, but then you find out they're all getting 130 emails a day on average, and they're sharing email. Yeah, it's just chaos. So no wonder people feel a bit overwhelmed. So, maybe that's something for us to think about for the future, of how we guide clients on less overwhelm, and what are the tools that can be used to make the employees' lives a bit better. Because, I know most advice businesses don't want any more turnover or burnout than what they're experiencing already. And I just have a feeling that, people are pretty tired. So, love it. Let's finish on that note, I reckon.
Nice way to end the pod. Thank you. All right. Thank you to our very own Peter Warren for joining me today. We'll have further information in the show notes about how you can access the Investment Trends 2022 Advisor and Advice Technology Report. And thank you so much to our audience for listening to another episode of The Game of FinTech. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so that you can stay up to date. Follow us on LinkedIn, or check out our website at www.finuragroup.com. See you again soon.